All right, great. Welcome everyone to the second day of the SciFM Summer School. Today, we will have in the morning session speakers from the FoundSci DARPA program, and to introduce the activities that are happening at DARPA related to foundation models. We're very excited to welcome Erica Briscoe, who is a program manager since September 2022 to sort of build, develop, and execute transition programs in computational social science, socio-technical systems, science and technology analysis. Before that, she was at University of Maryland at the Department of Defense University Affiliated Research Center, UARC, the Applied Research Lab for Intelligence and Security, where she was the director of research. Prior to that, she was at an AI security startup where she was senior VP of strategy. And before that, CTO at Georgia Tech's UARC. Without further ado, I'll let Erica take over. And she's going to share about the foundation model programs that DARPA is supporting.
Okay, thank you. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so what I'll do is just quickly cover two of the programs. I think it sounds like people are probably familiar with FoundSci, Alvaro's program. He couldn't be here, so I kind of stepped in last minute to take this slot, but I'll start with the program that I recently developed, and that is we're just now making awards. So unfortunately can't talk too much about who will be participating on it yet. That'll be soon, but very much in this area, and yeah, excited to share with you a little bit about it. So my bio was given, but I am interested, and I think I'll share interest with Alvaro in that, we want to understand how AI can be used to improve and sort of fix some of the problems with the scientific process. And of course, there are many. So there are programs I run at DARPA kind of focus on how do we come up with algorithmic methods or tooling that can help improve, for example, scientific modeling. But I've also long been interested in how we can leverage the mass amount of information that's out there, the science that has been produced in a much more automated fashion. So, so this program kind of gets, the one I'll talk about right now, scientific ScFy or scientific feasibility, gets at that. So the objective for this program, and this will probably be kicking off in October, but hopefully it'll spur some related programs as well. So I'm happy to talk about any ideas anyone has about other things we can do in this area. But for this particular program, we're focused on how can we take a claim, and especially a claim that has a basis in science, and basically perform an automated analysis of that claim in a method or in a way that's similar to how a scientist would. So just like a scientist would take a claim and kind of pick it apart and go do some research, whatever that might entail, we want to create automated methods to do that. And when I talk about this program, I usually try to contrast it a little bit with probably what some of the speakers will be talking about later, and that is sort of efforts towards scientific discovery, of which, of course, there are many, especially lately, and these are just a couple. But so as opposed to really, for this program, as opposed to trying to come up with new things, we aren't actually trying to come up with new things. We're trying to understand, given something, how can we automate that process of validating or figuring out if it's actually correct, and if it's not correct, then how. So that's a little bit different than creativity, which is sort of, wide open. This is actually sort of backward looking. So we already have the claim. We don't need to come up with a claim. We want to go work backwards from that claim to kind of understand its basic elements. And what I'm really excited about as part of this is not just claims that are sort of sort of look like facts. So something like this material has a tensile strength of, X. That's sort of akin to a lot of the work, recent work and things like fact checking, where you just try to go see if other things kind of corroborate that statement. Rather with science S&T kind of based claims, we're actually often looking at something where there's a claim that's expressing a capability. So that's kind of abstracted from just a factual claim. It's more that there's some capability that is provided or capable as the result of some science. And so it's up to our algorithms, or if we're doing it manually, for a scientist to sort of tease out what is that foundational science that would provide the means for this capability that's expressed in the claim. And this is just an example of one such claim. So in terms of the program, how it's going to kind of roll out is, given some claims, we are asking the performers to break down those claims into their constituent parts. And basically what that will look like is some sort of line of reasoning that would make that claim be true. And that results in a scientific feasibility analysis. And of course, we expect them to leverage past research, computational models, including data and code repositories. So really being able to leverage everything that's out there, just as a good scientist would do, but of course in an automated fashion. We are stopping a little bit short, but I think this is super interesting. And again, probably some future work of what we would call operational feasibility. That is, something might be scientifically feasible in a lab under certain conditions, or they might require, for example, all the power in the whole world to make this to demonstrate some sort of scientific event. But that doesn't mean we actually need to worry about it, because we would never expect to see that, operationally. So we can apply some sort of, simple kind of rules on top of scientific feasibility to get to that operational feasibility. But really, that's a whole other research question, which gets at, under what conditions might this be feasible? And that's a little bit outside of the scope of the program. The way the program is broken down is there are two technical areas. The first is this, analyzing these claims in terms of what are the constituent sort of reasoning steps that make them true. And of course, doing that across multimodalities, as I mentioned. And then the second technical area is in testing and evaluation. And I usually in DARPA programs, that's kind of cut and dry, come up with test data sets, do hold evaluations. But here I think there's a lot of interesting research to be done. And especially I think from this group, I think there might be a lot of good ideas, because and for myself, I've done a lot of work in bibliometrics and sort of scientometrics, and I think there's a lot to be learned from sort of the structure of science, and how that gets expressed in domains, across those scientific domains, and sort of the unique characteristics of those domains, and how they manifest different patterns, basically, for discovery, for collaboration, for sort of the foundational science leading to innovation. So I think there's a lot there that we don't usually capture or characterize that will be of interest when it comes to making these feasibility claims. So I'm hopeful that this technical area will not just be testing and evaluation, but will really start to tease apart what are those interesting dimensions across scientific domains. Just a little bit, we're not trying to do for this program, we're not trying to look at all science. That would be a bit of a large scope. So we're concentrating on 3 different scientific domains, say battery here, it's actually kind of updated that to material science, next AI, and then lastly quantum computing. And generally this is because the domains sort of increase in complexity and sort of the types of information we'd be looking to analyze in order to make those feasibility assessments. All right, so that's really the ScFy program. As I said, it's going to be kicking off in the fall. If anyone's interested, happy to share some of the events we'll have around that. I know Alvaro and I have spoken about, doing some joint workshops or something, but we're really hopeful that we'll be able to sort of combine a lot of our interest and sort of leverage the growing excitement in these areas to turn this this type of work into something much larger than just the individual programs. All right, so now I'll quickly cover Alvaro's program. And unfortunately, if you have questions about it, you should probably direct them to him. I know he's just getting this kicked off, so there's a lot of excitement around it. And again, excited for this sort of forward-looking sort of scientific discovery, and how algorithmic approaches can help there. So just real quickly, overview of his program. There's 2 TAs in this program as well, TA being technical areas. So what he's looking at is how we can leverage foundation models to come up with new hypotheses. So like I mentioned before, I'm kind of looking backwards, given a hypothesis, but he's trying to create new ones. And of course, doing that, also ingesting all kinds of data, multimodal data, and scientific literature that already exists. And he's specifically looking to leverage the power of inductive biases for doing this, to come up with, to guide sort of the generation of these hypotheses. And then part of his second technical area is looking at computational creativity, which as a sometimes psychologist, I find super interesting as well. But how do we understand when the algorithms have come up with something new? Is it meaningful? And can we sort of create or utilize metrics that can measure what is really, he calls it creativity. I think you could make a case for innovation here as well. Just coming up with something new, of course, is not necessarily good, but coming up with something innovative would really be the benefit here. All right, so I'm happy to take any questions on, well, I guess more so my program, because I'm probably not well suited to answer for Alvaro's, but or any questions about DARPA in general, or sort of the work in this area that we've been seeing. I'm happy to take any questions.
If anyone first time checking in the room, does anyone have a question on what DARPA is thinking about more broadly in foundation models, where it's going? Not anyone in the audience, online? You have questions for Erica?
Erica, this is a great program. I was just curious, in this sort of material science domain, what are the sort of kinds of scientific claims are you thinking? Can you walk through a couple of examples of how you were envisioning sort of this? I know obviously you can't talk about the actual awardees, but just give a flavor of the kinds of things that people are thinking about in that.
Yeah, well, so many of the approaches, I think, will focus around the generation of basically task focused agents that really do emulate sort of the scientific research process. So maybe an agent that's very good at going out and retrieving code that's relevant, and then another agent that's good at or trained up on creating simulations with the appropriate parameterization to execute simulations, to collect data for the feasibility analysis, et cetera. So I think we'll see a good bit of that. Part of what I'm super interested in, or I think will be a neat part of it, is what does the executive function look like there? And my announcement, my call for proposals, I call it, I think, a planner, but whatever it's called is, how do you build and then train that executor that can appropriately task these agents? And one of the ways I kind of liken it to is that it's kind of like when you're in grad school and you have your advisor who gives you tasks to go do. And that's kind of what, I think hopefully, some of this automation will look like, is that the wise advisor will go task the agents to go look for evidence and come back with it. And that evidence might be just in written form, but it might be actually the creation of new, scientific experiments that have to be run. And so that'll be, I think, an interesting sort of area and it kind of speaks to Alvera's program as well, is then we're getting into a little bit of the creativity of the experimental design of these agents. So anyway, yeah, I think it'll look something like that.
Thanks. One of my graduate students joked when he saw Alvera's program, I guess your program as well, is, they are the last graduate students that will help build so that future graduate students don't have to exist, right? So you're essentially building the graduate student agents. And I think it's very exciting that DARPA is sort of looking ahead. Are you familiar with other agencies that are sort of thinking about these things? How is the cooperation among other parts of DoD and maybe NSF, DOE in this space, given how rapidly things are evolving? I guess DARPA is sort of one of the leaders at this point, but just want to see if you can add some color there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting, exciting, but also sometimes I get sad because I've been, like I said, I've been in this space for a while, and I always thought there was a lot of opportunity, and other agencies and groups, of course, have recognized that. But up until, recently, and of course with the, with foundational models coming onto the scene, I think we hit a lot of roadblocks and a lot of, I guess, a lot of disappointing results, I guess I'll put it that way. And usually, and the agencies kind of interested, have their own reasons. So technical intelligence is a huge area, and again, it is still quite manual. So I think that, there's definitely agencies on that front that have been looking at this for a while. And then, of course, those that are just trying to further science. So like the Center for Open Science, for example, one of the programs I was previously involved with. And if you want to ensure graduate students still being needed, anyone in social science is probably very safe, because prior to my work here, I tried to do similar things in social science, and there is a complete mess to try to use any automated methods, just because the fields are so diverse and just there's tons of problems. But so I think social science graduate students are safe. Yeah, so I think it's there's still a lot of challenges, but there is definitely a lot of interest across different agencies. And one point that's been made a lot is there's a lot of course, open, science or scientific publications are there, but there's also tons of other data that governments have been collecting forever. So there's a lot more even information that we haven't even touched that we could leverage. So for example, DTRA, the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, has tons of testing kind of data from decades past that we could now automate sort of the analysis of. So anyway, I think everyone's excited, but still a lot of work to be done.
Thank you. So I have maybe a couple of questions. Maybe this belongs in the afternoon discussion, but how is DARPA thinking about, the compute required for some of these models? Maybe right now these are small, but so that's the first question. And then the second one is, there's obviously a lot of interesting research that's happening right now. But in many disciplines, you can say it has not shown evidence that it is actually advancing those domains, right? So at some point, there has to be progress that is quantifiable to move the domain, right? So how do you see that evolving? And you already pointed out that in many fields, this thing doesn't work well. So anyway, the compute question, and then, how do we grow this field, knowing that there are going to be many, many failures and many disappointments and some successes.
Yeah. So for the compute question, I don't think DARPA in particular has a big stance on this. What we are interested in, and actually, if anyone has thoughts, I'm happy to hear them, is sort of where we're going to hit walls when it comes to compute. And, I mean, of course, it's common conversation now about compute and energy requirements, et cetera. So I think DARPA is interested in, how do we measure that and how do we anticipate that? And I know I get asked about that and I don't have a good answer. So I think it's an interesting area to think about and from an from a compute, but also from an informational sort of standpoint. So yeah, I mean, really good question. In terms of, we hope to leverage partnerships, of course, with like national labs for compute and other entities. And thankfully, I think in these areas, because there is so much opportunity, collaborations have been pretty readily available, which is nice. And then to your second question, yeah, I mean, oof. Are we, on the cusp of a scientific revolution? To get a program through, I have to sell it that way. Do I believe it? I'd say, yeah, maybe. I think in some fields, I do think it's possible, but I think we have to be realistic and part of a lot of the thinking that went into my program is how do we pick fields where we are likely to see some success, and of course, not believe that these tools are just going to replace all scientists and suddenly we can sit back and everything will be invented for us. So I think being realistic about that and, kind of well scoping, like for example, material science. And one of the reasons I chose material science or specifically around batteries is because it is a very well constrained problem space with that's very well understood and the models already exist. So we can start to see there is, how much can we do in this very constrained problem space, and then contrast that with something like just AI in general, which is more of a wide open problem.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a very balanced perspective. And yeah, even I also believe materials and biology are one of the first few fields where we will see success.
Mm-hmm.
And over the next couple of weeks, we are also going to be hacking in those domains. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.